Ah, yes, the age-old argument. The GOAT. Who is the greatest of all time? An argument many would say is just stupid to even get into because how could we possibly relate and compare from different eras in a sport? But I think that's silly and rather lazy to say. You can always compare everyone to their era and then take their statistics, especially by percentages, and put them against each other, factor in other aspects, and you can have an answer. So let's try to do that with Formula One, the sport that just continues to grow massively because of that, well, show I'll just say thou shall not be named, since I certainly, as a Formula One truest and purist, would never want to watch that. And I know too many people in the sport. I know them as people. I don't want to know them in some Hollywood-esque film. So let's try to go over the GOAT argument. Now, this is my crazy document where I have always put in all the statistics of Formula One into my own system, my own point system, which I use throughout history, same system, and also delete bad luck. I could go on forever how big this document is. But yes, you're trying to delete bad luck because unlike other sports, there is a massive amount of luck involved in motorsports. For God's sakes, you could hit a bird on the final lap after you led every single lap and you finished in 17th place. Crazy things have happened out of your control. So you need to take luck out when you go over the history of racing to really find out why things are. And no more does that show up than with the history of Jim Clark. And Clark only won 2 championships. That's it, just 2 championships. Yet most people in an F1 paddock, especially the older folks, the true historians of the sport, the drivers that drove in the era, they would tell you that Jim Clark was the greatest driver of all time. Fangio said that Jim Clark was the greatest driver of all time. I spoke for 5 minutes with Jackie Stewart, and he said, no question, Jim Clark was the greatest of all time. I mean, basically, I asked him, what did you think of Jim? And you know how a 16-year-old boy would act thinking about a girl that he wanted to take to the prom and just couldn't stop thinking about her? Well, that was Jackie Stewart, one of the top 10 greatest drivers probably of all time, let alone Formula One drivers. I'd have him 6th. But he was fawning over just talking about Jim Clark. I know someone that worked at Lotus, personally, very well, in the 70s, and he said everybody in the mechanics would talk about how Jim Clark could drive an hour and a half full speed and have less wear on his tires than you would driving to get a coffee a minute away. And he would win the race by a minute. But he had a lot of bad luck with those Lotuses because they weren't reliable. And these statistics, which I was hoping would show Senna, who was my hero, would be proven the greatest of all time, even with his 3 championships. But these statistics, after putting them all together, had Jim Clark leading by quite a bit, actually. To the point where it's almost like I didn't even have to do any of these statistics anymore. It's clearly Jim Clark, and especially with everything else I've said. But there's more involved that you have to look at. Again, he only won 2 championships, so really, we're going to put it on him. But of course, I always talk about the whole point of sports and why we watch sports. It is the statistics that we see on paper versus the eye test. The statistics versus the eye test. I said Tom Brady was the greatest quarterback of all time by 2006. 2006, this is the greatest quarterback of all time. It took most people 10 plus years for them to come around. To me, it was an eye test. You could just see it. I didn't care what the statistics say. But if you go into deep level statistics, you will find it. So let's try to figure this out, especially from the vantage point of new fans who think it is so unquestionable that Lewis Hamilton, who has over 100 wins, over 100 poles, and 7 championships, they want to say 8. We'll actually go into that. They think it's unquestionable. He has every record imaginable. How is he not the greatest? Well, we have to break things down much more to think that. And simply put, at the beginning, I will tell you, anyone who says blah, blah, blah is inarguably, just unquestionably the greatest of all time, they are insane and they are lazy. If you think Lewis Hamilton is unquestionably the greatest of all time, you're insane and you're lazy. Not looking into the statistics. Now, I didn't say if you think Lewis Hamilton might be or possibly is the greatest of all time, let's look over this. Then I wouldn't say you're insane or lazy. First document that we will look over is, we need to do percentages here, guys. Everything has to be about percentages, not pure numbers. So here's a breakdown. Now, this is using bad luck involved. Okay, so the numbers that you see won't be exactly the same. I gave Lewis Hamilton, say, the win of Abu Dhabi last year. He absolutely deserved the win. He should have won the race. He shouldn't have won the championship. Let's not go over that. But he absolutely deserved that particular win. So these numbers won't be the same. So if you look at this, races led laps. Okay, 58% of the time he's raced in a race, he has led a lap. Comparable with Michael Schumacher, 56%. Comparable with Jim Clark, 59%. Comparable with Senna, 53%. Fangio, 76.5% of the races he raced in, he led a lap. Okay, how about fastest laps? 20% of the time, Lewis Hamilton has had a fastest lap. Now, fastest laps are tougher because different strategies across history, it's kind of tough to compare, but let's just look at it anyway. Schumacher, 30%. Clark, 37%. Senna, only 11%. He was never good at fast laps. That was always Prost. He was more of a... Prost and Hamilton are very, very similar in their thinking methodology and just how they go about a race. Fangio, 45% fastest laps. My goodness. How about podiums? 62.6% of the time Hamilton scores a podium. Sounds pretty amazing. But Michael Schumacher, 61.6%, pretty much the same percentage for podiums. Jim Clark, only 43.8%. But that's because, you have to look even deeper into the details, Jim Clark only finished second once. Because pretty much, if Clark had a car that was going to finish the race, he was going to win it. And that's why so many people believe that he was the greatest. So this is misleading that he only had 43.8% of the podiums. Senna, 49.4% of the podiums. Not very good when you see the other ones. And Fangio, once again the best, 68.6% of the time finished on the podium. Poles, Hamilton. He's got over 100 poles. He's the greatest ever. Really? Not really great on percentage. 35.4% he gets the pole. Schumacher, 27.6%. Schumacher was even worse. Jim Clark, 45.2% poles. Senna. Everybody thinks, oh, Senna, the greatest poles. Well, in some ways you could say that. But just the pure number here, 40.1%, not the great. Oh, Fangio, 56.9%. My goodness. And finally, wins, 36.1% for Hamilton. Solid. 36.4% for Schumacher. 34.2% for Clark. Okay. Senna, only 25.3%. Senna does not do well in this little exercise we're doing. And then Fangio, 47.1%. Almost half the races Fangio went into, and those cars were not reliable back then, he won. Now, of course, I remember a lot of these numbers are getting rid of bad luck. But at the same time, guys, if you went into a race and 25%, 40% through the race, your engine cut, I do not, and it looks like you were going to win, I don't count that as a win because there's too much of the race left. You might have made a mistake. These are mainly where your engine cuts out, that something that wasn't your fault, 70% into the race, 80% into the race, 90%, then yes. But if it happened early on, no, I can't count that because there's too many other factors that could have happened. Now let's look into other stuff. Seasons with a completely dominant car. And we're going to get into this a little bit more in a minute, of much more detail. Seasons with a completely dominant car. 5 seasons. Okay? That's a ton to be in a completely dominant car that's automatically going to win the championship. Michael Schumacher, seasons with a completely dominant car. 3. And 2001's a little debatable, but we'll say 3. So we only had 3 years, 2 less seasons and with less races than Hamilton, where he had a completely dominant car. Jim Clark, only one. Now, I've talked to a lot of people that would say 1965, completely dominant car. They say that was much more just his driving, that 63 was the only season he really had a completely dominant car. Senna, only 2. 88, 89. 1990, the Ferrari was right there. Of course, it went into Japan where they had him and Prost had the famous crash in turn 1. The Ferrari was totally competitive. And 1991, the second half of the season, that was the beginning of that Williams era where Mansell was tremendous at the end of 91. And then we know what happened in 92, 93. The Williams was totally dominant. And Senna couldn't compete with that in McLaren. So only 2 seasons for Senna that he had a totally dominant car. And Fangio, it's a bit more difficult because it's tough to judge those years. But from everything I have talked to people and read, really only 1950 and 1955 can you totally dominant car where you know he's going to win the championship no matter what. And we know all of his statistics. Now, seasons with a car capable of winning the championship. Lewis Hamilton has had 11 seasons with a car capable of winning a championship. This is why his statistics are so amazing. 11. Let's look at the other drivers. Okay, Schumacher, 10. That's why his statistics were so amazing. 10 seasons with a car capable of winning the championship. Jim Clark, seasons of a car capable of winning the championship. 3. And really, he should have won all of those titles. Senna, 4. And really, he should have won all of those titles. Fangio, all 7. But he did win 5, and he really kind of should have won 1952. So, yes, he had 7 seasons, but look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. And then, how about times beaten by a teammate? Lewis Hamilton, 2 times. 07, same amount of points in 07. So, well, we could leave that to the side. 2011, I mean, he basically lost, dead tied with Button in 2010 and 2011. So we'll just leave it at 2. We'll call it 2. Okay. And that is official as well. Michael Schumacher, times beaten by teammate, 0. Jim Clark, times beaten by teammate, 1 time. And that was early in his career. Okay. Senna, times beaten by teammate. Really, it was only 1989, and to me, he deserved that championship for sure, especially he should have won Suzuka. That should have been a win. So that's even questionable. You could say it's 0, that Senna was really beaten by a teammate. And he had a legend in Prost for 88 and 89, a legend. And then Fangio, times beaten by teammate once in 1950, and as I already just said, really he should have won 1950, so even that's questionable. So Lewis, and especially we're seeing here in 2022, he's getting beat by Russell. We'll see where this goes long season. But if he loses a little bit of slack here in times beaten by teammate, because Lewis has never had a legendary teammate. Bottas, a kid in Russell, Rosberg, Button. Some of these are good drivers, but they're not great. Alonso, there's no legend that he had to deal with, but neither did Michael Schumacher. So you can attack both of them on that. Okay, now, seasons that you won a title. 7.5 to 15. I'm partially counting 2016 because normally I would say Hamilton definitely should have won 2016. In my statistics, as much as I give Hamilton lots of grief, he's already an 8-time champion. He should have won in 2016. But if we use the rule for Patriots fans out there, the 2007 Super Bowl, so many Patriots fans are so pissed at what happened in that game with the lock of the Eli Manning helmet catch to David Tyree. But the thing is, the Patriots are so good that year, they should have been ahead by 14 points or 20 points or 24 points. It shouldn't come down. It should not have come down to that final drive. And that is the same thing with 2016. Nico Rosberg is not some legendary driver. He's not some amazing all-time driver. He's a pretty good, maybe very good at times driver. He's no legend. Hamilton should have had that championship wrapped up. It should not have taken to the last race, and it should not have taken his engine to blow in Malaysia for him to lose that championship. That's on him. But we'll call it 7.5 for now. In 2021, he absolutely did not deserve that championship. That championship should have been wrapped up well before Max Verstappen had so much more bad luck. But we'll say 7.5 and 15. So 50% of the time, it's still amazing. 50% of the time, Lewis Hamilton has won the championship. 7.5 out of 11 seasons with the car capable of winning the title, 68%, and one with 2 different teams. Okay, these are all solid statistics right here, all solid. Let's look at Schumacher. 7 titles in 14 seasons. And he was injured halfway through 1999, keep that in mind. 50%, same as Hamilton. 7 titles in 10 seasons in a car capable of winning the title. Pretty much the same as Hamilton. 1 titles with 2 different teams. It's right there. It's almost identical to Hamilton, even with all different factors. Jim Clark, 2.5 titles in 7 seasons. And I do partially count 1964. That was a really controversial ending. 35.7, not so good. 2 titles in 2 seasons capable of winning. Of course, that's 100%. And he only won titles with 1 team. So Jim Clark loses here. When we talk championships, he does lose out. So now we look at Senna. 3.5 titles in 10 seasons, which I'm partially counting 1989. Only 35%, not so good. 3.5 titles, again, 1989 is questionable, in 4 seasons in a car capable of winning the title, 87.5%. If you gave Senna a car that could win the title, he was pretty much going to win the title. But he only won titles for one team. That does hurt him a bit. Although at no point when he was not in a winning car did he have a car really capable. Someone could argue 1987, but that's still tough. 1987 with Senna is very similar to like 2010 with Hamilton, where he had a chance, but did he really have a chance? Even I would say, probably not. I won't blame him for that. And now let's look at Fangio. 5.5 titles in 7 seasons, because I'm partially counting 1950, 78.6%. 5.5 titles in 7 seasons with a car capable of winning the championship, same number. And he won titles with 4 teams. 4 teams. 4 teams! Unbelievable. No matter where Fangio went, he was winning. So when you look at these kinds of numbers, okay, with straight percentages, we're going to break it down more in a minute, but with straight percentages, the greatest of all time, it's not even close. It's Fangio, right? What he did in 51 races, it's totally Fangio. 5 championships, 4 different teams, all these purple markers everywhere. So when you look at things in lots of detail and you ask people that lived, they would say Jim Clark. If you ask people around the world, they would say Senna. If you look at these plain percentages, you would say Fangio. If you looked at the plain numbers, you'd say Lewis Hamilton. So you're kind of getting an idea of, this is a bit complicated, isn't it? And the one I haven't mentioned is Schumacher, which is partly why Schumacher, for me, I'll give this away now, yes, is the 5th. He's the 5th best driver, even though it's hard to imagine that with all the races I watched him live, but I'd have to go 5th. Okay, now let's go to the next document here. Let's break this down more. So first, let's start at this point here. These are the championships that I have in my statistics. Senna won the 4. He did win 89. Fangio, we give him 1950. Really should have won that. Clark, we give him 64. It was such a controversial ending. If you want real controversy, if you think 2021 was controversial, check out Mexico. So Vettel, of course, he won his 4. Prost, really, it's a different 4. Prost won 4 championships in real life, but my 4 are different. Hamilton, I give him 16. I do. As we talked about, it's kind of BS, but I do give it to him. So he has 8 championships without 2021. Schumacher, 7. Of course, had Senna lived, we all know he would have won the championship with Williams in at least 95, 96, 97, maybe even 94. So Senna could have been a 6 or 7-time champion. So these are the numbers that I go by for my data. Now, how about clutchness? Let's talk a little clutchness. The tight end of seasons. Okay, Schumacher, end of 94, very tight. He crashes into Hill. Very controversial. 97, crashes into Villeneuve. Again, you want endings that are controversial, guys, go check out 94 and 97, and 1967 and 1964 as well. He really should have lost both those for what he did, but he won one of them, lost one of the other ones. Okay, 98, the car wasn't ready yet, but it was a tight championship. He lost it. 2000 tight championship, he won it. 2003 tight championship, he won it. 2006, he was clutch. He should have won 06. That one bothers me. It's stuff that happened in Brazil. And, of course, his engine blowing at Japan. And the first half of the season, that Renault was illegal. Alonso should never have won 05. It's the most undeserved championship of all time. And 06 is right up there as well. He does not win 2006, unfortunately. So Schumacher in tight battles only won 3 of those 6 battles. Well, Lewis Hamilton, you could, again, to use a Tom Brady reference, you can kind of do this whole thing. Brady, won in 01, and then he won in 03 and 04, and he really should have won in 06, and he, certainly should have won in 07. And then if he didn't get injured, he could have won in 08. And then, 2011, my God, they were about to win if Welko doesn't drop the pass. So you could go through you could say Brady should have won 12 championships, literally 12 Super Bowls by now if you wanted to. You also could say he shouldn't have won in 01 because of the Tuck rule. He shouldn't have won in 16 because of the Falcons collapse. 14 because of Malcolm Butler. You can go on and on and on and do this. Well, it's the same thing with Lewis Hamilton. In 2007, even me, who's not a Hamilton fan, would say he kind of got screwed in 07 with Brazil. Yes, he screwed himself at China. But 07 is, what happened in Brazil is still maybe one of the most under-talked about controversies of what actually happened at Brazil, where his car broke there for a minute and cost him the championship. So that one, he doesn't win, but it's questionable. But then 2008, he did win. But if the rain didn't come exactly when it came, and at the exact intensity it did, he would have never won that championship. And remember, I call that the biggest choke drive in F1 history. Even though people see that as like a crowning achievement of Hamilton's career, I think it was a total total choke job that he gets passed by a kid, Vettel, in a crappy car in the rain with 3 laps to go. All he needs to do is finish 5th to win the championship, and he gets passed by a kid in a crappy car in the rain for 5th, and he's going to lose the championship, and he ends up winning it. So he didn't deserve 08 to me, although even in my statistics where I changed luck, he does win it by a point, same as in real life, oddly enough. 2010, he could have won it. But really, I'm not going to give him hardship for 2010, even though he could have. He really didn't have the car. Would have made sense. 16, he doesn't win it, but he really deserved it. 2018, I'm being nice. 2018, Vettel should have given him more of a run. 2017 was Ferrari's fault that Vettel couldn't compete, but 2018, Vettel could have competed. The Ferrari was competitive enough. That was all him. But I consider it a tight championship. It should have been a battle. I give Hamilton that one. And of course, 2021, Hamilton absolutely did not deserve that championship at all. He didn't lead in any category. So, and he had way better luck. Out of these 6, we can debate all day every single season, but it's really, it's 3 out of 6. That's not very good. Sebastian Vettel, 2010, 2012, pretty much the most clutch drives I've ever seen. The end of 2010 and the end of 2012. Just incredible clutch driving by Vettel. And it's why, for younger fans, why do people talk about Vettel so much? Was he really good? He sucks now. Yes, he was ridiculously good. And my prediction in 08 was he was the future of the sport, not Hamilton. And I was right. Until 2018, I had to give up that was wrong. But for 10 years, I was right. And that was my most bold prediction because Hamilton was the hero of the world at that point. I said, no, the future's Vettel. 2010, 2012. 2018, to be consistent, I'm putting it here. Yeah, I have to give him grief for that. So 2 out of 3. Now, Jim Clark, he had 2 tight battles where he actually had the chance to win. Because he was leading in the final race of 1962, was leading in the final race of 1964, and could have won the title, but reliability failed him. And then, of course, 1967, terrible luck failed him. So he could have won 5 of 5 tight championships, but really, there was 2 chances, and he won both of those. Fangio, 3 times it was really tight, 50, 51, 56, going down to the final race. I give him 1950 for what happened at the end of that season. He's 3 for 3. And, of course, Senna, I give him 89 for especially what he did in Japan. And if you go throughout the season without the crazy point system they had then and just do it by today's standard, he wins that championship. So he was clutch. Fangio was clutch. Clark was clutch. Vettel, clutch. If you go before 2015-16. Hamilton and Schumacher, not clutch. I mean, what Schumacher did in 94-97 is just, unforgivable. So they lose out on that. And that's important to me. This could be another video, how all the incredibly tight championships, everybody says, oh my God, 2021, greatest season ever. Guys, 2016, 2012, 2010, 2008, 2007, 2006, 2005, 2003, 1999, 1998, 1997, 1996, 1994, 1990, on and on and on and on and on and on. Most seasons in F1 history have come down to the end. This is why I don't want gimmicks. I don't want crazy things to try to make Formula One more exciting. Look at all the seasons that came down to the end. To the end. In 1976, Rush, the movie Rush is about that season. I mean, you don't need anything like this to happen. Anyway, as we continue on, look at the 50s, 50, 51, 57, 58, 59. There was less races back then, but still, they went down to the final race. In more detail, we talked about beaten by teammate. Well, some things came up when I looked at this. Why Mansell, Lauda, and Brabham are usually never talked about in the GOAT discussion. Well, look, Mansell was beaten 6 times by a teammate in the 12 years he was in F1. The same for Niki Lauda. 6 of the 12 seasons he was beaten by his teammate. Jack Brabham, last person to win in his own car, 3 championships. He should be higher on most people's list of greatest drivers, but he was beaten by his teammate 6 of 13 times. That's not all that great. Nelson Piquet, 3 of 13, not bad. Vettel, 3 of 13. Prost, 3 of 13. He did have Senna as a teammate. Jackie Stewart, 2 of 9, not bad. Hakkinen, 2 of 10. Emerson Fittipaldi, 1 of 6. Before seasons, he didn't have a teammate, so that's kind of hard to go with. Clark, only 1 of 8. He was beaten. Fangio, only 1 of 8. Senna, 1 of 10 he was beaten, and he had a historic teammate. So really could be 0 out of 10 if we look at 1989. Hamilton and Schumacher have never had historic teammates, never had unbelievably good teammates. And Schumacher was never beaten. And I'm saying Hamilton, we're going to go 1 out of 15 or 2 out of 15, depending on how you want to talk about 2016. We'll see if this goes up. So it looks good overall, but you can kind of question, especially that 2010-2011 period. And, of course, my biggest gripe with Hamilton is the 2009 through 2013 period, where Hamilton had a middling car, and we'll go to this in a second. And he was good. He was very good. He wasn't amazing, as Senna was a middling car, or Vettel or Schumacher wasn't a middling car. Seasons in a totally dominant car. Now, this we talked about. Now we're putting it in the full list. This is where Hamilton gets knocked a bit. Alonso's never had a totally dominant car. Piquet never had a totally dominant car. Emerson Fittipaldi, Hakkinen, Jim Clark, Nigel Mansell. Only once. Jack Brabham, Niki Lauda, Michael Schumacher, Vettel, Fangio, Senna. Only 2 seasons had a totally dominant car. And these are the things you have to look at when you're looking at plain statistics. Jackie Stewart, this is what hurts him. 3 seasons he had a totally dominant car, and those are the 3 seasons that he won the championship. Hurts a bit. Prost, 4 years, had a totally dominant car. That hurts him. That's why I would never put him up at the top. And Lewis Hamilton, 5 seasons in a totally dominant car. And if you talk about the stupidity of Ferrari, you could put 2017 in there. And if you talk about Vettel completely choking halfway through 2018, you could say 2018. So I could make an argument that he's had a totally dominant car for 7 years, almost double the next in Prost with 4, and certainly double Jackie Stewart and everybody else in history with 3. So he has had the most dominant car career of anyone. And that you have to look at when you look at the plain numbers. You can't just go by the plain numbers. And then here we go here. Okay, amount of teams won with. Well, this is where Senna gets hit a bit, and this is where Clark gets hit a bit. And Vettel. Jackie Stewart won with 2 teams, Brabham with 2 teams, including his own. Lauda 2, Piquet 2, Schumacher, of course, 2, Benetton and Ferrari. Hamilton 2. Prost won with 2, although the Williams car was one of the most dominant cars ever in 1983. But Fangio, look at this. Fangio, 4 teams. It's just, you'll never see it again. I don't think you'll ever see it again. Could. I don't know. It would mean the sport has completely changed if that really actually does happen. This is the main thing I wanted to get to. Not only are we going to decipher the numbers by percentages, as we did in the first document, this is going to separate into 3 different categories of percentages. And that is that, to me, there are 3 distinct categories every season of where you are and what car you're in. Here are statistics in seasons with a car capable of winning races, but not the championships. Here are statistics in seasons with totally dominant cars. And here are statistics in seasons with arguably the best car, capable of winning races and championships, but not a completely dominant car. And they're 3 very different categories. Like right now, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc are both in this category, right? The Ferrari and the Red Bull are about equal as the best car. So they're arguably the best car, capable of winning races and championships, but not totally dominant car. That is this category. Where Hamilton this year is, if the Mercedes gets a bit better, would be in this category. A car capable of winning a race or 2, but not championships. So you have to separate. So now we're separating into not only the percentages, but specifics of the percentages. And when you look at this, there's not enough data for Hamilton or Clark in here to really do it, but we can at least go with Senna and Schumacher and look at these statistics. Okay, now, Senna, cars capable of winning races, not championships, 85, 86, 87, 92, 93, right? Hamilton, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13. Those are those 5 years I talked about a little earlier. Schumacher, 92, 93, where he was doing amazing things in that crappy Benetton, and then 96 where the Ferrari was terrible, and 05 where the Ferrari was completely terrible. So these are all comparable years. And let's look at what do we have here, okay? Senna, 17% of the time winning. Hamilton, 13. Schumacher, 9. Poles, 22% of the time for Senna, 19 for Hamilton, only 7 for Schumacher. Fastest laps, 10%, 18%. Podiums, 27%, 34% for Hamilton, 45% for Schumacher. Second place in the title. Senna did get a second place in these categories. Nobody else did. Third place in a title, Senna got 1, Hamilton none for second or third, and Schumacher got 3 third places in these seasons. But it's a bit all over the place. You can't really delineate anything here. It's overall pretty similar for 3 drivers. Now let's look at the seasons with a totally dominant car, and this is where Hamilton has made his money in the statistics. Well, let's look at Hamilton right now. Again, 2014, 15, 16, 19, 20. I'm being nice to him. I could count 17. I could count 18 if I really wanted to, but we'll leave it here for those 5 seasons. Now, there's less seasons for other drivers, of course, but the percentages will be the percentages. Senna, 88, 89, the 2 dominant years. Fangio, 50, 55. Clark, 1963. Schumacher, 2002, 2004, his totally dominant seasons. So let's look at the percentages. In terms of winning, Clark, 80%. Completely destroys it. Schumacher, Hamilton, similar. Fangio, Senna behind. Interesting. How about poles? Senna, 81%. This is where the idea and the history of Senna was the most incredible qualifier ever. This is where it comes from. When he was given a totally dominant car, he pretty much got the pole every single race. And the other thing to look at is he didn't just get pole. He would get pole by a mile, by a second and a half or more. And his teammate is Prost, one of the greatest drivers of all time. He was murdering Prost in the same car. That's where that legend comes from. And this is why watching every single race is important. Even the statistics don't tell you everything. So 81% of the time. Hamilton, only 46% of the time did he actually get pole. That's not good. Fangio, 62% of the time. Clark, 70% of the time. Schumacher, only 42% of the time. So Schumacher and Hamilton, again, kind of falling in this category. You give them a dominant car, they don't get pole all that much. Fastest laps, Senna, only 18%. He was terrible at fast lap. Hamilton, 31%, not good. Fangio, 50%. Clark, 60%. Schumacher, 48%. Okay, how about podiums? Look at Schumacher. 91% of the time. The 35 races he had a totally dominant car, he was on the podium 32 of them. Jim Clark, 100%. The 10 races he had a totally dominant car, all 10 times on the podium. Fangio, 9 of 12. Senna, not very good, 23 of 32. Hamilton, really the third best, 85.4. So that's solid, but it's a mix of where people are good or not. And you look at this and you're like, man, Fangio doesn't do that well in these statistics. That's crazy. I thought in the other statistics, Fangio was easily the best. This is why you need to do lots of research, guys. You can't just look at plain stuff and say, this is the best, this is the best. You got to do data research. This is all pretty basic stuff. So Fangio loses in this. But then one title. They all won titles. They all won their titles when they had the most dominant car. And again, I'm counting 89 for Senna. I'm counting 2016 for Hamilton. I'm counting 1950 for Fangio. So I'm taking out the bad luck and going through the stats. So now here we have the last category. Seasons with arguably the best car, capable of winning races and championships, but not a completely dominant car. And this, to me, is the most important category in a lot of ways, because you have a car that could win the championship, but what can you do with it? And this is where most of Schumacher's career was. 1994, 95, 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2003, 2006. So many seasons of his career with that. And Hamilton, similar. 07, 08, 2017, 2018, 2021, where he had really tight battles with someone else. Fangio had 4 of these, Clark had 4 of these, and Senna only had 2 of these. But still, let's look at the stats. Winning percentages, all very similar, except Hamilton. A little bit lower, but, big sample size. But still, look, Schumacher, 9 seasons, 142 races in this category. 43% of the time he still won. But it's kind of a wash. Okay, how about poles? Schumacher does the worst. Hamilton lags a little bit behind the rest, but Schumacher doing the worst here. Now, fastest laps, of course, Senna being, again, terrible with fastest laps. Hamilton, only 19%, but, of course, different eras. This is the hardest one to really talk about, fastest laps. Different eras did different things with fastest laps when you needed to have them. Today, they were going out. Someone behind you was going out and getting tires to do one lap to get fastest lap. But still, 12%, 19%, not very good when Fangio and Clark are getting 50% of the fastest laps. Podiums. Once again, Hamilton doing well on podiums. 75% of the time Senna was in this kind of a car, he'd get on the podium. 72 for Hamilton. Only 50 for Clark. Again, the reliability was a big deal in his career. But this one is pretty similar. 1 title. Okay, Schumacher only won 5 of those titles. Clark, 2 of 4. Tough to debate that one. Senna, 2 of 2. Fangio, 4 of 4. Hamilton, 3 of 5. But the thing to look at here, when you see all of this, very detailed, we're taking each season, putting a different category, putting out the percentages. The thing to look at is that they're all kind of the same. There is no one that sticks out. So to say that one person is the greatest for sure is totally ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And as I said, I think it's insane. I think it's lazy. Very few people are going to go through years and years and hours and hundreds of hours of work to figure out things and go through every single race in F1 history to go through all this. Yes, but to say one person is the best, because clearly, when you look at all these statistics, no one has come out on top that much. I would say Jim Clark probably has, just by the way of how people talk about him, the stories they have him, and the fact that in my really detailed statistics, he was gapping everyone. But the thing is, you look at his championships, he's like, well, God, he won 2 championships. Yeah, but there's a lot of reliability. But then there's some data that, you look at some of these and go, well, really? Can we really say he's definitely the best? It's tough. I think Schumacher is about the only one I'd say he's in the top 5. I think any one of these 5 you can argue to be the greatest of all time. But he maybe is the one that I have to put 5th. I think you could kind of argue for any of the other ones. I haven't seen enough from Hamilton in a middling car, and that's why I think this 2022 season that his fans and him want to just mark off as, well, it's a tough season, the team sucks. No, this is where I judge the crap out of you. Senna's legacy was created in 84, 85, 86, 87 when he didn't have a great car. That's when his legacy was created. And Hamilton didn't do that so much in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13. I need to see a season where Hamilton's not in a good car, and he's definitely beating his teammate, and he's competing for podiums and maybe a win or 2 here and there. That's the only way I'm moving him up the list. I need to see that. I know what he can do in a dominant car, but look, guys, I hope there's anything I've taught you in this whole video, is that even Hamilton's dominance in a totally dominant car is not anything different than what other people did in a dominant car. In fact, it's not even as impressive in a lot of ways than what people did in a totally dominant car. And this is something that people should watch. Look at this, okay? For the time that Hamilton has been at Mercedes, they have had 53 1-2s. 53 1-2s. Regardless if his teammate was Bottas or Rosberg, neither one are legendary drivers by any stretch of the imagination. In that same time frame, Red Bull has had 2. Ferrari has had 4. And McLaren has had 1. Okay, 2, 4, and 1 compared to 53. And since Verstappen and Ricciardo had their 1-2 in 2016, they've had 26. That is astounding. So for anyone to think that Hamilton, look what he's done, he is at so far and away the most dominant team that there's ever been. It's just, people have to understand that. He has had a ridiculous team. And I think the biggest knock on his legacy was Sakir in 2020 when Russell jumped in the car. He couldn't fit in the car, didn't understand the steering wheel, didn't get the car. And he not only puts the best pass that anybody put on Bottas in his career, he should have won the race twice. Not only once, he should have won it twice. And that proved how good the car is, that a kid could jump in and do that. And no news media wanted to talk about that. To me, it was one of the biggest stories of Hamilton's entire career, is what George Russell did at the Sakir Grand Prix in 2020. And we are seeing it this year. So I'm not overreacting to what happened, because we are seeing it full on of what George Russell is doing. Toto Wolff wants to say to Hamilton, sorry for giving you an undrivable car, but doesn't mention, oh yeah, well, your teammate's 4th in the championship and just got 4th in this race. No. So you have to understand the unbelievable dominance. Again, look at this chart. 2 for Red Bull, 4 for Ferrari, 1 for McLaren, 53 1-2s for Mercedes. Understand the level of dominance, and that it is not any different from what we are seeing in these other statistics from other drivers when they've had dominant cars. So again, the final of all this is, it's a very, very difficult topic, and there's so many aspects, so many subtopics to go over. No one is the greatest. We haven't had one. Max Verstappen is on a chart and on a line for sure to be the greatest. And the chances of him doing it are extremely small, because Vettel started the beginning of Vettel's career from 07 through 2013. Easily was on track to be the greatest of all time. Now most people wouldn't even put him near the top 10 because of what he's done after. I still certainly would. So right now, there's no clear winner, except I would say Jim Clark, even though I'm a Senna fan. It's hard to argue Clark, but there's even things about Clark that are a little questionable. So, what do you say, audience?